Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to talk about the needs of actual entrepreneurs on the ground. And all these entrepreneurs are taken from the Africa Eats portfolio. And I'll explain what that is in a little bit. First and foremost, my name is Looney. So I'm the moderator of this panel. I am a longtime entrepreneur. I've been doing this now for 30 years. First 20 years in the technology field here in the States, venture-backed software companies. And then the last 10 years, I've been focused on mission-driven for-profits all around the world in the form of a global business accelerator called Fledge. Fledge looks something like this. So we run programs aiming to help mission-driven entrepreneurs from anywhere in the world, not just Africa. We've been doing this again for 10 years. We've run programs in 8, 9 cities, whatever that adds up to. And over those 10 years, we've collected quite a number of companies. We've invested in over 120, 140 companies in every continent but Antarctica and Australia, including a very large number of companies in Africa. And then what we did in 2020 is that we took all of those companies that were run by Native Africans, which is all the ones we invested in, all focused on food and ag. And that's, of course, the biggest industry in Africa. And therefore, we wound up with a lot of companies in that sector. We have other companies in the Fledge portfolio separate from that, but we invited all the food and ag companies to join in to a novel investment structure and a novel support structure called Africa Eats. And those companies are based in 10 countries. And they export to their neighboring countries. A few export off the continent, but most of this is the domestic production. So they export to a few other countries. So we've painted in 15 that we know of. And they are a wide variety of scales of companies. So the kinds of companies that apply to an accelerator tend to be pretty small. And some of these companies came to the program back in 2014, 2015, 2016, so a long time ago. And collectively, these 30 companies, if you looked at their total aggregate revenues, if you tried to buy them all up and make them a conglomerate, which I don't advise, but if you did that, back in 2016, collectively, these companies earned $1.6 million. And here we are, it's 2021, and these companies earned, sorry, it's 2022 now. And in 2021, at the end of that year, they earned collectively $16.8 million. So they've already grown tenfold. Some of them have grown 20-fold, 30-fold, 50-fold. You're going to see that in a bit as well. And I saw Heike join. You can come on, turn on your video, and we'll invite you to speak in a second. So these companies have been growing, and they've been growing well. It's a like 60% compounded growth rate back to 2014. That's a nice, healthy growth rate. We like to see that scale of growth rate. That's fast enough that people can keep up. It's not super stressful. And especially, it's not the type of growth that the venture capitalists are usually looking for, where you burn a ton of capital and you more often than not, blow up along the way. These are profitable companies that are growing every year, that are raising money in order to grow more each year. All right, and I'm going to turn to them now and have them explain at least 4 of them here. I don't have all 30 with me here. That would take too long. So Joseph, give us 2 minutes on what AgroSupply is and what it does.
Thank you so much, Looney. My name is Joseph Ogwal. I'm the founder and CEO of AgroSupply. We are an input distribution company. We supply small farmers agricultural inputs, cereals, and vegetables. Instead of giving these smaller farmers these inputs on credit, we develop a layaway prepayment system that helps these smaller farmers prepay for agricultural inputs during off-season so that we can deliver them when rain comes back. We are working with a number of agents, village agents, about 140 of them across Uganda. And our system use extremely USS strike guides. Thank you.
All right, thanks. And Hervé. Hervé here doesn't run one company, he runs 3, but they are in a collective group. So let's start with go through all 3.
Thank you, Ronnie. My name is Hervé. I'm based in Kigali, Rwanda. So we are running 3 companies in in meat processing and livestock farming, plus transportation of perishable goods. So we have started working in 2012 by a meat processing company. Then afterwards, in 2016, we added the Livestock Bank, which is a company supporting farmers to produce quality and quantity of animals, which we are looking at to the market. So we support farmers so that they can be able to produce all those animals with the quality and quantity needed by the market. Then panel meat processing, we do processing meat and export meat. And panel transport, which is turning it to be truck Rwanda, is they do transportation of perishable goods only. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
And Heike, if you can turn your video on and come and tell us something about Golden Pot. So Golden Pot is a company that works with hundreds of smallholder farmer women in Tanzania. They're focused today on maize with a little bit of ground nuts on the side. And they then process the maize into maize flour, and they have plans to produce some other products as well. The general idea being that most people in Africa are farmers or spouses of farmers, and a lot of the women in Tanzania do the farming, but the way the society is structured, the rural women generally don't get paid for their work. The men take the product to market and get paid. So this is a way to break that model and have incomes to women as well as producing more food for Tanzania. All right, so the kind of work, the kind of scales, I picked these 4 companies because they're at 4 different scales. So we found this company a few years back. They didn't get started until 2017. So this is one of the newer companies. And back in 2017, they were a tiny little company of $4,000 of revenue. And here we are. It's been 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. It's been 4 years, and the company has now grown to $250,000. And the expectation is that it's going to get to $500,000 this year. There's a big bump up in production due to us investing, but mostly because she found an unused factory and took it over, and that's getting up to speed. Hervé, tell us about your journey in terms of scaling up your 3 companies and some of the challenges you hit along the way.
Okay. First of all, when I started panel meat processing, the first challenge I met was the human resource. In my working, I was in business management background, but I didn't have a knowledge in meat processing, and to have the skilled personnel in my country was a little bit harder. And also to connect myself with a limited capital I had that time with a supplying market was not easy to me, and which still the same was a problem when I was going to the market. So as I continued to grow myself and even my network, that's when I met Fred, then which became a very huge push up to me. Then that's when I started grabbing some opportunities which I didn't even had the capacity to grab. Then I started growing slowly. That's even how I started seeing the most of the challenges I had, which was the subprime market. Then I started the Livestock Bank, because one of the challenges I had was to, as a processor, to connect to the farmers directly, whom the prices was very good compared to the middle people who got animals from farmers to the processors. Now, with Livestock Bank, I have been able to connect myself with the farmers directly without any intervention. The journey continued in that way. That gives us the opportunity to go to the market with competitive prices, even locally and even to the regional market, especially Central Africa. I mean, DRC, Gabon, Congo Brazzaville. So we have been there with competitive prices. Even we can be able to beat some international meat vendors whom had very huge quantity to supply to the market, but we went there with the fresh meat, with the quality. We can be able to track everything from farmer to the slaughterhouse and from slaughterhouse to the market. Then as we continued, we have been able even to solve the other challenge we had, which was the transportation and the logistic of perishable goods. So that's stage by stage. We met different challenges, and we have been able to tackle all those small challenges we had, and then we continue to grow. So up to date, I was lighting something about how pan-unit processing have been able to even to hire people whom we didn't been able to hire last 10 years. Up to date, we have a strong team which can even lead the business without a founder. So that this is a very good milestone we have been able to achieve. Now we are doubling the sales each year. It's like last year we had 300,000. Up to date, we are more than, 2020 we had 300,000. 2021 we are among up to 500,000 and above. So this year we are targeting to come up with $900,000 US. So and to the transportation company, now it's 2 years old, but it's doing sales of about 500,000 US. So that's how we are. That's what we are doing. We are coming up to the market with the new products, so that we can give a variety of choices to the meat consumers. So we are growing up.
We'll talk about your product in a bit, but
yes.
I just want to point out to the audience, and we'll come back to you as well. But
okay.
So I met Hervé 2016, tiny little company at the time, and he chose to do this in a fashion of multiple companies. But in total, his multiple companies are earning, what's that, 1.4 million dollars as of the end of last year, and will probably be 2 million at least this year, if not bigger. Right, thanks.
Yeah.
Joseph, let's hear about your story and your growth. You're growing a little faster than that, at least in the last year. What's been the challenges along the way?
Thank you, Looney. My story is that I am typically an agricultural guy. I started farming when I was very young with my parents, and then decided that I needed to go to school and study agriculture. I have a bachelor degree in agricultural science. I've worked with smaller farmers my whole life. In my work life, my major role was to give smaller farmers input and develop a repayment plan on their microloans. And prior to starting AgroSupply, AgroSupply started as a problem that I kept seeing when I was employed. Most of the time when I was employed, I used to give smaller farmers a lot of inputs on credit, but recovering the money was a problem. And also saw that there are so many seed companies, so many fertilizer companies across the world making one of the best drought-resistant variety of seeds, but these seeds are not reaching smaller farmers. So I was like, how can I get good seeds that are available? Because good agricultural practice, good agricultural production starts with the right seed. Without the right seed, the farmer is not going anywhere. How can I get these good seeds that are drought-resistant to the bottom of the pyramid to smaller farmers who need them at the cheapest cost as possible? And then piling up with my record of giving smaller farmers input on credit and having difficulties with recovering money, I was like, how can I design a good prepayment system that will help these smaller farmers invest their own money into agriculture without us giving them inputs on credit? This way, farmers don't have to be worried about taking input and paying an extra interest, as well as AgroSupply don't have to be worried about going after farmers because they have not paid the money that they're supposed to pay. And then in 2017, I started AgroSupply with the typical solution of having a lot of input stores within communities, going to a local, within communities at the bottom of the pyramid, renting a small house, sourcing inputs and taking it down there so smaller farmers can buy. The next step was like, if farmers have inputs, what can we provide them? That is the knowledge. They need knowledge on how to do plant spacing, how to manage crop, how to know which variety is good. And we hire someone who has that agricultural knowledge to sit in the store to replicate the same knowledge to farmers. And then the second problem that came in was like, if farmers are producing, how can we get them access to market? We started connecting these farmers to different off-takers. The whole model changed. We decided to remove
$1,000 in 2017. By 2021, his business at
Hey, thank you. I will mute that person.
In 2017, we had 6 input stores in Uganda, in northern Uganda. When we were going to 2018, we launched the layaway payment system that would help the smaller farmers plan for their system for their season in advance. What the system does is we don't profit from the system. We're still selling inputs and getting our money out of the inputs. The system is just a payment system to help these farmers invest their own money into agriculture without us giving them on credit. So every farmer across Africa, not only in Uganda, in Kenya, Tanzania, even in West Africa, they all have between 3 to 4 month period. When
Okay,
they're not
I'm gonna hold you at that spot. So what you're describing at the moment is the problem of farmers, which is a big common problem across the continent. What I promised the audience was the challenges of the companies that are, in this case, serving the farmers, right? And a lot in the other cases, buying from farmers. And so let's just jump straight to. We met in 2019. We invited you into the accelerator in 2020. Tell the audience what that big problem was in 2020 to scale up.
So in 2020, our biggest problem was access to financing. We used to, because we open up another side of the business, which is also B2B side, where we sell input to organizations, large scale farmers and cash and so on. So most of the time, access to working capital was a problem. And when Africa It came in and we went through Fledge and so on, we started getting access to working capital. And that is why we decided we raise our revenue really high, up to $1 million.
And this is the piece that we didn't know when we invited you back into Fledge and into Africa Eats. Your business model is that you pre-sell products to farmers. They pay you before you deliver them the product, which is like every retailer's dream, right? Every business's dream. You're not waiting 30 days to be paid. You're being paid before you're even handing them the product. How can you have an operational capital issue if you're being paid ahead of time?
So we are not a bank. So we are not supposed to be the layaway system. We're not supposed to use that money as a working capital for the company. So that means that whatever these farmers are paying for, we have the product. But sometimes the payments are so heavy that surpasses our capital needs. So we need to buy input in advance to be able to supply them. Then we can transfer that money directly into a bank account immediately if every farmer has already picked up their input because they have already paid. The reason being.
Again, I'm going to break in just to speed things along. So it's not that you didn't want to use the money. You were legally not allowed to use the money.
Yes.
And so my advice to you, I remember this in 2020, is, okay, where's the money? And the answer was, it's at Standard Chartered. And I said, why don't we just go to Standard Chartered and have them lend against the money? And they said,
that money doesn't belong to us yet. It still belongs to the farmers unless we deliver.
But they wouldn't even lend against it. The banks in Africa are so reluctant to lend that they wouldn't even lend when they had 100% of the collateral of the cash sitting in their own bank. East Africa Fruits, which looks like a gigantic company. Like when I show it in this fashion and when I show it in all the graphs, like it looks like it's succeeding and it's grand and it's doing great, and it is doing great. But what amuses me about the view here in 2020 is that I met, here he is. I'm going to let him tell the story here. Ellie, as soon as you can, turn on your video. We're going to ask you what your challenges were in growing this up. But what's amusing to me is that I met this entrepreneur when he was 24 years old in early 2014, when he had just finished year one at $100,000. Tell us what the challenges were to grow a tiny little company to be this this grand multi-million-dollar year company.
Hi, Lonnie. Hi, everyone. Thank you for this discussion. My name is Elia Timotheo from East Africa Fruits. And just to quickly respond to the point
Okay,
that
give us a
Loni was
1
making.
minute of what it is, and then tell us what the challenges were to get to way past $1 million a year.
Thank you. So we are, just briefly, first we are aggregate of produce from farm to retailers, and we use extensive technology and logistics to deliver fresh produce to informal businesses and small businesses in Dar es Salaam, and we're planning to expand that market to other cities within Tanzania, like Dodoma and Zanzibar. We have gone past, as Loni has projected there, $5 million. And through the journey, we have had a number of challenges, which I think that I mostly think that they helped us to build as a business. Some of those challenges, of course, how to navigate through the logistics business in Tanzania. And I think that would apply to most countries in sub-Saharan Africa, where we're getting produce from, it takes thousands of kilometers away from where the customers are. And in most cases, there are no formal logistics companies that will offer us transport from the farm to retailers. And that really caused us to really reinvent the business model, where we have to do it with a lot of trucks. So logistics actually becomes part and parcel of our solution, where our main solution is to supply produce to the retailers and other businesses. Some other challenges, of course, the team really is one of the biggest challenge, where we getting the right people, the right team in place to be able to fulfill the dream and ambition of the company is really a challenge. We have a high turnover rate in terms of the middle management, where we hire, and at some point we don't get the right fit, the right mindset that will help us to propel the business going forward. I'll let it end there for now. Of course, there are a couple other challenges we can talk about and be able to respond as we discuss with my fellow entrepreneurs.
Okay, and since we lost Golden Pot, I'm going to call on one other that's sitting in the audience here, Victor, because you have kind of a unique challenge in growing your business as well. So why don't you come off of mute and tell us about the challenges at Zetto?
Thank you, Rooney, for giving me the opportunity to speak. I was not expecting it. So my name is Victor Mhango. I'm the chairman and founder for Zetto Enterprises Limited. Our business is involved in distribution of veterinary products, animal nutrition products to livestock farmers in Malawi. At the moment, we have a network of 15 Zetto agrovet shops distributed across Malawi. We're also setting up an animal nutrition product manufacturing facility. So we'll be manufacturing concentrates, premixes, and feed for livestock in Malawi. So we started working, of course, our first shop was opened in 2016. That's when we joined the Pledge Accelerator program. So far, we have been growing. From 2016, we just did about $30,000 then, but in 2021, we managed to reach $850,000 in sales. So our main issues, of course, in terms of key challenges that we faced as a business, of course, the first one is access to finance. Apart from Pledge, the other investor that we have been able to get on board was Hippos back in 2019. But our business is involved in importing a lot of products, and that means we have to pay our manufacturers on time, and that has been a struggle at times. In addition to that, for some of you who might know the situation in Malawi, availability of Forex is also a big challenge. So sometimes we may have funds in Malawi Kwacha in our bank, but we're not able to pay our suppliers because there is no Forex available in the bank. So we have to wait in line until the bank says there's some euros or dollars available, and then they're paid to our manufacturers. So the best thing that has happened is that we have good relationships with our manufacturers. Otherwise, it poses a risk that we may lose access to those products, and that may lead to stockouts, which may affect our business going forward. Yeah,
Yeah.
so for
But-
now I can share those ones. Yeah.
All right, thanks. And I happen to have I have your graph of your company or picture of your company. I don't have one of those fancy graphs. So we met that company again. I think you said $30,000, $35,000, and now it's about 800,000 6 years later. And I wanted to share that one with the audience here because I think Malawi is just at the leading edge of this issue that we're going to see across Africa. Which is countries that run out of dollars. And so we have businesses, all the businesses here have something they need that's not manufactured in Africa, whether it's trucks or equipment, or in this case, the actual products that sit on the shelf. And unless the companies unless the countries are able to pay those bills, then it becomes a big problem. And so we're seeing that first and foremost in Malawi. I think we're seeing the same thing in Ethiopia at the moment. And those are the first two on the continent. All right. So going back to the rest of the panel here, Hervé mentioned a bit about hiring. So can I hear from the rest of you on the challenges of finding a good team to put together?
So from my experience, finding a good team is really a big challenge. I remember when we started, since we didn't really have a lot of money, we used to hire fresh graduates, those who have interest in working in a fast-growing company, which actually really worked very well for us. But with time, you need also people with a lot of experience. So we started going to talent recruitment companies. Right now, working with one in Uganda that source talents for us and employ them, then bring them to Agro Supply. But it's also not easy because sometimes the demand from these people are so high that we cannot meet as a growing company. And so hiring has always been a really big problem for Agro Supply as we grow. But yeah, we're also trying to source for talents within. And one of the things that I have seen working now is bringing consultants to help boost our team that are in-house here. We hire consultants on a short basis, like in finance, in marketing, to come and work together with our team that are available here to kind of get things up moving.
All right, thanks. How are you solving this problem, Hervé?
Yes, as Jose end up, even as what we are doing, of course, we cannot afford to hire whoever we want on the market. But what we do is to spot like a 2 or 3 good people which can occupy some key positions. Then the other positions, we hire those people who have passion and who are eager to run, and who can stay with us some longer time. Then we train them with that team with experience. As we train them, we build that capacity with them so that as we can spend some longer time with them, then we can get benefit from let me say cheaper stuff, but with improved knowledge and skills, because they can up to date. Like the people we were hiring in 2020, we are targeting at least that we can spend 5 to 10 years with them, and up to first 2 years they are critical years, but the rest of the 8 years could be a very good benefits to us. So and it's very, very helpful to the company which doesn't have the capacity to hire whoever he wants, but who needs to use at least the good stuff. Yes.
All right, so let's turn to the company that has all this revenue, and therefore must not have this problem, right, Elia? What are you seeing now that you're big and established and you know, relatively gigantic?
Yes, exactly. So the challenge is still remains at large. We have deployed a number of techniques. For example, as my colleague mentioned, hiring a few senior people and pegging them with a few junior candidates who will learn from this person and be able to grow. But again, it is still a challenge for some of the positions. Sometimes we find that the onboarding system itself is a challenge. We can interview good people, but when they come into action, they turn out to be not the kind of people we have been looking for. We are still trying to look into revising the onboarding challenges where we can have a role play, but that will be limited to people who do not have job. If you have somebody who has been doing some work somewhere else, it's going to be very hard to do that role play. It is still, I would say, still remains a challenge, but at least we're trying some new things here and there to overcome that one.
Okay. All right. Thanks. To the audience, if you have questions, now's a good time to put them in chat, and I'll call on you. But what I'm going to do in a second here is share some of the insights that we've seen working with 30 of these companies on the ground in Africa. And the way we do this at Africa Eats, it seems to be a little different than is normally done. I think that's because of the entrepreneurial background that I have. I am an entrepreneur. Like, I do write checks. I am an investor too. I run funds, but I self-identify as an entrepreneur. I can feel what these people are going through. I've done that. I've done similar things, but here in the States, and I'm learning about the challenges in Africa. The rest of the team in Africa Eats has built companies in Africa, and so they can feel this even more than I can. And so what we do is we just talk to these companies and try and help them through their issues. We're there as mentors, we're there as board members, and we are there as investors. And then 5 things in the past 2 years. We got started in 2020. In the last 2 years, 5 common issues, 5 common areas of issues and challenges have popped up. And so what we're working on is deploying solutions in the form of services. And one way I describe this is they're just things that are missing in most of Africa, right? Somewhere between north of South Africa and south of Egypt. It's really hard to do some things in this size of company on the continent. First and foremost, we saw this one back at Fledge. These are great entrepreneurs, but with rare exception, Ellie being one of the exceptions, and a few others in the portfolio. But with rare exception, they didn't go to school and take business classes. They didn't work as an accountant before they started their companies. They've never run a company based on spreadsheets. And as you saw in the growth charts, most of these companies a few years ago were earning tens of thousands of dollars. And when you're running a company earning 40, 50, 60, 80, even $100,000, as a CEO, you do that in your head. Like, you know all your customers, you know exactly what everyone's doing in your company, you know when the money's coming in, you just sort it all out in your head. You don't really need to do it on paper, or at least you don't think you need to do it on paper. And then as you start to get a company that's $1 million in business, which, as you saw, some of these popped up really fast, you then discover that, oh my God, I do need to, in fact, learn how to run my company on reports. And so we just call that financial management. And we found a great company in Ghana called Built Accounting. And they basically built the 80% you need from QuickBooks for like $8 a month. You can subscribe to it. And we liked it so much that we actually invested in it. We're the Africa Eats is the sole investor at the moment. If you are an investor who likes tech companies, please talk to us, because they're looking for more money and we would love a co-investor in that one. And we're just trying to get everybody on Built Accounting in our portfolio. That's low-hanging fruit. Second one that came along, when the pandemic hit, it seems like the national grids got less reliable, and most of them weren't reliable to start with, but they got much less reliable. And so we instantly got a whole flurry of requests for generators. And two reasons we didn't just jump in and start funding generators. One is electricity that comes out of diesel generators is really expensive. And 2, we like the planet. So we called up a bunch of solar companies and we priced out what solar and batteries would be if it covered the entire production of the company, not just at the emergency times. And we were surprised when we did the math that it was cheaper to put solar and batteries in than buy the electricity from the national grids, right? And if you're unaware of the prices, it's not super expensive for electricity in Africa. It's like 15, 16, 18 cents a kilowatt hour. It's about the same as the average in the States. And when we looked at what we're offsetting, it's not coal plants. It's on East Africa, it's like 60-40 renewable energy anyway. So it's not a huge renewable piece, but we could get reliable power and we could get it straight from the sun and get rid of the other 40% of dirty energy. And so we sat down and said, great, that's the solution. Next problem is our companies can't afford solar because it's really expensive to install. These installations are like 100, 200, around $100,000 or $200,000 to do a factory of the scale of company that's in this crowd today. And so they don't have that money. So we're a financial institution. We set up solar leases to help them with that. We've done only 2 so far. We plan on doing a whole lot more. As you heard from Ellie, this is one of his trucks. He has a bunch of brands in the East Africa Fruit Company. His issue is logistics. Same thing, Hervé, he had issues with logistics, was why he started a logistics company. The more general problem that we found in talking with our entrepreneurs is that you can't, when you go to a truck company to go buy a truck, here in the States, when you do that, they say at the end of the, you negotiate the price and then they say, well, do you want a truck loan or do you want a truck lease or do you want to pay cash? Same thing with cars and everything else in the States. And what we've seen in Africa is that they just have one option, which is here's the price, paid in cash. And trucks are expensive. Trucks are $35,000 for a pickup truck, $50,000 for a box truck, $100,000 for a big refrigerated truck. It's expensive, just like the solar is expensive. And it's necessary for especially these companies that are moving actual physical products around. And so when we talked to our 30 companies and asked, well, how many trucks do you have and how did you acquire them and how did you pay for them? What we discovered was with rare exception, at about 75 trucks in total, I think 70 of them are owned outright by the companies, paid for either with money from an equity investment or money that was recycled from profits. So again, equity investments, but internal equity investments. And you know, it works, but it constrains the growth of these companies because they only have so much retained earnings, right? Again, we're talking about companies that are generally hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenues, which means tens of thousands of dollars of profits, which means maybe one truck every 2 years if all goes well. And that constrains the growth. One other system that Africa Eats is working on is to set up truck loans and truck leases. Next one we came across, there was all sorts of lockdowns all over the continent. One of them hit one day in 2020. I think this is 2020 issue. I don't think it was 2021. But some lockdown hit in one of the cities. And we immediately got a call saying, well, we lost all our revenue in the next month. We can't do business in the next month. We need to make payroll. And so we started asking the question to all 30 companies, how much money do you have saved up? And unsurprisingly, these are fast growing companies that have no access to banks, that have very limited access to investors, that are recycling their money into things like trucks. And so they don't keep a lot of savings around. And so we talked to all the companies. We actually got everyone in a tent together in Nairobi last November. And we had a show of hands who would like a shared savings account that we can borrow against. And we spent a lovely hour, 45 minutes even, I think it was quick, having the entrepreneurs themselves decide what the rules would be on the savings account. And 45 minutes later, we had the rules, and it basically came out to be something like a SACO. Same basic structure that the farmers use for their own savings, scaled up to the size of a company. So they put in whatever they want. They can borrow up to 3 times what they put in, and they pick the interest rate, and they will have an investment committee to pick who gets the money. This is about to be launched, but we figured it all out in November in under an hour. And then similarly, we started this conversation together in November. We haven't finished it yet. We don't have the answer yet. But what we know is collectively across the 30 companies, we work with over 100,000 farmers. And we are pretty sure that 500 of them are insured and pretty sure the rest are not. And we see droughts and we see floods and we see locusts, right? When you have this kind of, when you see 100,000 farmers in 10 countries across the whole continent, there's always some kind of calamity going on. And therefore there are always farmers who are not earning what they need to earn. There are always farmers that don't have the seeds they need to plant the next season. And collectively, we're going to figure out an answer to that. Again, we started on that conversation in November, where I'd say we're like 70, 80% through figuring out what that can look like. And we'll get that up and running for our farmers. None of these are a standalone solution for all companies. We're just trying to solve this problem for 30 companies. And if we can solve it there, then maybe one of these services will spin out and serve the rest of the continent. And with that, I'm going to open up questions from the audience. I see one chat. Okay, so Asteria, if you want to come off and mute and ask your question. Has any company used digital technologies? I found outside the continent, data-driven agriculture expands effectiveness. Data is lacking on the continent. Have the companies you work with use data? And I'm gonna, oh, and I see a hand up. I'll call you in a second. I'm gonna call on Joseph to answer how much technology is in AgroSupply.
Thank you so much, Looney. So with the current system that we're using, we collect a lot of data from smaller farmers that actually help us in making decisions. We know where these farmers are living. We know how much these farmers are putting on a daily basis. We know their gender. We know their age difference. We know a lot of things about these farmers, and this helps us in making decisions. We know their income, how their income are increasing or decreasing. What are causing this kind of problem? What are causing the increase? What are causing the decrease? Sometime we realize that it's price fluctuation in the price of commodity that causes either increase in income or decrease in income. So we collect a lot of data from smaller farmers that help us in making decisions on how we can help them. There are data that, because at AgroSupply, we don't only supply smaller farmers with one variety of seed. We do maize, sorghum, soybean, but sometimes because of the data that we collect from the previous season, you might find that 90% of farmers this season are going to take maize. That means that we need to invest more money in maize seeds rather than investing in soybean seed. So this kind of data that we collect from farmers also help us as a company to make decisions where we should channel our capital. So at AgroSupply, our system helps us to collect a lot of data from smaller farmers that help us in making decisions and how to work with these farmers.
And why did they tell you what their income is? How do you get that? How do you get that data?
So how we get the income report is that our system collects the investment that the farmers are making into agriculture, so that we know exactly that these farmers are invested amount X in soybean this season. So when we're going to buy from the farmers, there has to be a transaction between the farmer and AgroSupply. So our agent captures the transaction. The transaction is then feed.
That's the cost of inputs. How do you know the value of their outputs?
How do I know the value of the? Yes, that is exactly what I'm explaining. So how we know the value of their output is that when they're selling their produce, that is selling the product, our agent capture the transaction that is happening. If they have 2,000 kilo bought at $1, feed into the system, we know that revenue for that season is maybe $200. So the system automatically deducts the amount of input plus the output to give us the income of each farmer that we work with.
So it's in the system, and it's part of the relationships you have with the farmers.
Yes.
And so thank you for that. And I'm going to go to Hervé on the livestock bank side. Do you use any technology, or is it just done?
Yeah, we do use the technology. We do use technology. Mostly the technology we use. When we started, of course, we have started as other small companies with non-digitized data collection, but up to date, we are using technology to collect the data. We collect the data first of all to be able to have information to give to the consumers on the market, first of all. To be able to compete, we have to have others. If mostly meat consumers need to understand and to know where the animals they are consuming, where they have been grown, what was the animal feeds have been used, what was the medicine have been used, what was the diseases attacked the animal, who was the farmer, etc., etc. So, and first of all, that's we using technology to collect those data. Secondly, we're using technology to help farmers to be able to manage their farms, because before our grandparents were just doing farming as a way of saving and just to see animals there in their farm without having an idea of business. But up to date, things have been changed. We are farming because we are in business. So to be in business, you have to count. To be able to count better is we can help those farmers to count by using their mobile phones. Even those one who are not able to use mobile phones, we have the very good way they can even use voices so that they can give us some information which we can help us to manage their farms, even they don't do themselves.
Okay, great. And Elia, so you have a even more complicated set or even larger set of farmers and retailers to deal with. Are they communicating with you on apps? Are those apps on smartphones, or are they just WhatsApping you?
Yeah, USSD code. They are on in a phone up to date. They can be able to communicate with us via applications.
Okay, and same at East Africa Fruits.
Yes, I would say that it's a combined of three factors. So we have of 6,000 retailers whom we're serving on a daily basis. We have over 5,000 farmers, and all of them, not all of them have smartphones. So we have quite a few number, less than 10% who have smartphones, and they can communicate with us directly with a smartphone and applications. For the distribution management systems and farmer management systems, they can link directly, but that is only 10%, less than 10%. And we have about 30% of them who can use USSD code to link up with the systems and provide information and data that can come all the way to our systems. And the remaining percentage has to be linked with our team. So we have a number of foot soldiers, the sales reps, as well as the field agents, who link us directly and feed in the data from farmers or from customers to the system. So that really works in terms of the current situation. But I know that as we grow, the number of people who are using smartphones is increasing by day, and that is the way that we wish for all the future systems to work.
Okay, thank you. And to the audience, I would tell you these three are kind of the leading. The leading three out of the 30 companies in terms of using digital technologies. All the companies using technologies, everyone's using phones, but by far the biggest technology use that we see across our network of companies are trucks and cold storage, which everyone dismisses because it's not digital and because it's over 100 years old in terms of invention, but it is technology, right? It was harder to farm 120 years ago than it is today because you can move food around. Ifra, you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you, Looney. I'm sorry, I'm not in a position to turn my camera on, but I'm going to go ahead and ask my question. So I have two questions, and I've noticed that somebody in the chat has also, posed one of the questions. And the first question is to the entrepreneurs, the panelists. What are some of the regulatory challenges that you're facing in terms of, running your businesses, in terms of like the circles that you're talking about? And somebody else has asked that question, so I'm not going to go into it. And then my second question is to you, Looney. I'm a social entrepreneur and I'm transitioning into the investment space at the minute. And a huge challenge that I faced running my social enterprise was in terms of like getting our investors to understand what the market is like here in Africa and how different it is from, the usual, Silicon Valley, or like the understanding of what businesses are like, where they come from. And a lot of investments that come into Africa, foreign investments. But one of the biggest challenges that people don't talk about is gap that exists between the foreign investors and the entrepreneurs on the ground, and the lack of investors understanding what the environment is like here and what the markets are like. So you've mentioned a lot of, you've talked about your understanding of the market here and, how you've been working with the entrepreneurs that you're investing in or supporting. And, that's really commendable. But what's your advice to other investors coming in? What would you tell them?
Okay, so I'll answer the second question first, and then we'll put the first question back to the entrepreneurs. In general, well, what I tell everyone is that you have a lot of assumptions in your head that you don't even know are assumptions. And when you start to do anything new, whether it is starting a company or jumping in as an investor, the most exciting part to me is to have those aha moments when I discover something that I just took for granted. In the African context, the biggest challenge that I saw way back when I started investing in the continent was lack of exits. And so I said in my bio, I spent 20 years as a software entrepreneur here in Seattle, and I raised money from California VCs. And there's a model that they've been using since the 60s on how they invest. And that model requires acquisitions and IPOs in order for the investors to make money. And so if there are no acquisitions, or basically no acquisitions, and there hasn't been an IPO in the Nairobi Stock Exchange in years, and JBerg's not what it used to be, then you're not, why are you investing in that style, which is still the most common style for startup capital? And then your only other choice is to your only other choice is to do debt. And then there's issues around debt and not getting enough money back given the risk you're taking, and a few other things. I have a long talk on that. So the first and foremost advice I give to everybody who's a new investor in the continent is to think about why they're investing, what they want to get out of it, and then think about a structure that will get them there. And I have some alternative structures. I've taught at Sankalp before. When someone else is answering, I'll toss a link in the chat window. It's a different place. It works differently, and you just have to approach it in a different manner. Hopefully that's helpful to you. And back to the regulatory question, let's jump back through, starting with Ellie. Real quick answer. Do you face any regulatory issues doing what you do?
Not really. I think it is most times when this, as a startup, you tend to overlook a number of things in terms of compliance. But as you grow, you get to be compliant. And I think having some few investors really helps to run a regular checks on compliance issues, and then you can be compliant. The challenges we face are more on the investments. Sometimes we have to delay investments, loans, equity, and take a very long procedure to register those equities or loans with the government and central banks. Other than that, I think the challenges are mostly just to be compliant. So the cost of being non-compliant usually is greater than being compliant, and that's I would say mostly it happens for startups. They tend to compliance.
Thanks. And Hervé, you're working in one of the top 10 easiest places in the world to do business. Do you have any regulatory issues you're dealing with?
I can say no, because mostly our government is very supporting to whoever want to set up a business and starting a business. Of course, when you are a citizen, and they support a lot, and we have a lot of programs. Even if you don't have those regulations, they support you to be able to follow the steps you have to follow, so that you can have whatever it asks, so that you can have. For example, let me say about the standards. When you are producing food and you need some standards, we have different programs. The Rwanda Standard Bureau have set it up so that any startup can follow those steps, and with their support for free. free support. They support you so that you can reach to the level they want you, so that they can offer you a standard. So I can say on my side, I didn't had any challenge with the regulations. Yes, of course, there is some thing you have to feel as a business person who wanted to set up a business for profit. Of course, there is something you have to follow, and but there is no complications if you want to go in whatever they have set it up. You are free to continue, and without any problem. For my side, I didn't have any problem with that.
Okay, all right, great. And then Uganda is not known as the easiest place to do business. Anything in Uganda besides the for Joseph, besides the fact that we couldn't actually use the money we were collecting?
I don't think there is a lot of challenges in doing business in Uganda. At AgroSupply, our only problem that we have is the policy. And this specific policy about mobile money is really discouraging digital transaction, because in Uganda, the government put taxes on mobile money. Farmers fear paying these taxes, so they really don't want to use mobile money. That's the only challenges that we're having. But otherwise, if there is any policy that is available, you really need to follow it and just obey, because the government is too big to fight with.
Okay, thanks. And then the actual question in the chat window is asking me about any regulatory challenges about the SACCOs. Not that we know of. So Africa Eats is incorporated in Mauritius. It's also one of the easiest places to do business, and we found it to be true to that word. It's pretty easy to do business. We have a global business license. We've talked to our lawyers about what other licenses we need. If we need another one, we'll get one. And then we did set up an American subsidiary, which is probably going to be the actual company that runs the savings program, so that the money is stored in the U.S. banking system. And there's no issues. It's lovely. It's multinational. One of the lovely things about running a multinational company is that when you're not doing business in the country where you're incorporated, you're generally allowed to do whatever you want as long as it's legal. Not to take that lightly, but that's kind of how it goes. Okay, there's a couple other questions before this. Can you share any intervention that has enabled greater market access? Yeah, so when you look at the companies that have popped up in the fastest growing companies by percentages in our portfolio and in all sectors, not just in food and ag, the number one way to get companies to get bigger is to solve their operational capital issue. And that operational capital comes in a few different forms. The number one issue we were facing in 2021 in this particular portfolio was we had too many customers. And I always describe it that way because it doesn't sound like a problem. But the problem is that every time you get a big order from a big customer, a supermarket or a big manufacturer or the government, it doesn't, anybody that's big, all those big customers promise to pay 30 days after delivery, if not 40 days or 60 days after delivery, but they don't pay upon delivery of the product to them. They pay sometime later. But you have to go and get all the inputs in order to make the product. And the product could be honey in a jar, and it could be bananas. It could be beehives, physical products. And so you have to pay the farmers when you pick up their outputs. Right? Your inputs are their outputs. And we can't be financing on the backs of the farmers. These are smallholder farmers we work with. And so we have to pay them when we pick up the supplies. We have to pay the suppliers when we buy wood to make beehives. We have to pay the company for the fuel to move the trucks, right, from place to place to get all this stuff. And so that has to be paid right now. And yet the company's not going to get paid for 45 or 60 days, depending on how long it takes them to make that delivery. And so every time we get an order, every time one of these companies gets an order, Africa Eats gets an email saying, I got an order and I need some money. And so first and foremost, what Africa needs in order to grow companies is a market for operational capital. Full stop. Normally that's done by banks, but banks don't do that in the whole global South, not just Africa. And so if not banks, who? And there are some institutions that claim to do this. But when Joseph sent me an email in December saying, I got this humongous order, we turned to the few institutions we knew that could do it. And one said, no, it's too small, which is frustrating. It was a big number to us, small number to them. And everybody else I talked to in December said, yeah, maybe it's interesting. We can look at it. And when I asked them, how long does it take you to make a loan? They're like, 3, 4, 6 months. And we know from working with a lot of institutions that 6 months is really fast for institutions. And so if you get an order, if you're a company, you're an entrepreneur, you get an order from whatever, the supermarket chain, and they would like to buy, these size companies, they would like to buy $200,000 worth of product. Right? That's enough to have 10% bigger revenues, 20% bigger revenues, or double for the year if it was a few years ago. Often the answer is, I'm sorry, we can't do it. We don't have any capital. And you can't tell them that. You have to make up some other excuse. But that's the biggest leverage point. And then just take a breath on that. And then the next leverage point is literally the logistics of getting the food here and there. Because again, as I explained earlier, these companies are starved for trucks because there's no finance by the manufacturers to lease the trucks, and there's no finance by the banks to do loans on the trucks. And therefore, sometimes we just can't do the order because we just can't move the stuff around. There's a company in Botswana that's delivering products between South Africa and Namibia and Zambia. And last year, one of the issues was we just physically couldn't move the truck from place to place to deliver the order. The truck was busy moving stuff from one country to another, and it couldn't go to the third country. We just needed another truck. Next person asked, have you explored the feasibility of shared services like IT, finance, HR, and so forth? We are in the middle of figuring that out now. We think there's probably a solution there, but we're operating, these companies are operating in 10 different countries in 4 different time zones with a variety of challenges. And we're not sure that trying to centralize all that in Nairobi, where the Africa Eats team is based, is ideal for all these companies, especially because we have no companies in Nairobi. The nearest to Nairobi is Golden Pot in Arusha, and the second nearest is in Kisii up in the mountains. Often it really does. The pandemic kind of showed us that you can work virtually, but it also showed us that you can work more efficiently when you can see each other face to face. So we're trying to figure that out. Joffrey, who's another one of our companies, wrote back saying he's not seeing any regulatory challenges. He's running 2 companies in rural Kenya, and both of them are communities. A normal community would have set them up as a co-op, but Joffrey is a lovely human being and an innovative human being, and he set them up as community companies. Next time we'll invite him to come and share those stories. Crispin asks, many companies are facing challenges to get funding. What can they do to solve the problem? I can call on Rakia to try and answer that one. But the basic issue that we're seeing, let's call on the guys to answer this one. Hervé, how many institutional investors have you talked to, and how many have invested in any one of your companies?
Okay, up to date, I can't. It's more than 100, more than 100, yeah. But what I can say about this is we spend a lot of time trying to convince investors rather than spending a lot of time convincing our customers. When we are convincing our customers, we will get numbers. And when we have numbers, an investor who can be able to understand numbers can be interested to talk to you. So we try to talk to investors rather than trying to convincing our customers. So I have spent a lot of time up to date. I'm still talking to different investors, but it's not everyone who can understand you. But whoever understands you, you work with him, but
But,
I have
you've
talked to a lot
you've
of.
closed 0 so far, right?
Yes, yes.
Sorry, you've closed 1. You've closed me, right? And
Yes.
no other ones,
Yeah.
right? And we picked, you know, and just to be clear, I'm a very strange investor. I picked
Mhm.
this group of companies when it was $30,000 a year,
Mhm.
which no one else would do.
Mhm.
Okay, Joseph, same question to you. And you're newly large, right? So again, if you guys forget the numbers, this Joseph's company was like $200,000 a year in 2020, and then $1 million in 2021. So how are you doing in terms of convincing investors to join in?
Talking to investors is a lot of work as well. I don't know how many investors I've spoken to. I have talked to a lot of investors, more than 200 investors. Very few of them has actually gotten back. There are actually an investor I spoke to, that person took me, the institution actually, they made me do a due diligence for 2 years and ended up not investing in agro supply. They even spoke to farmers, they spoke to everyone in our network, and they never invested money. That was a really turn off for me. We have spoken to a lot of investors, and one thing that I'm learning now is that maybe we need to hire someone else to raise for us our money, not us, because sometimes when you talk to these investors, that you actually lose focus in running the business because you're always having calls late in the night, early in the morning, at midday, and so on. And some of them doesn't even commit money. So it's not easy, but at least one thing that has worked for AgroSupply is that whenever Africa eats, if we send them an email, they're the quickest investors that we have ever met. They will make decision as fast as possible, and if there's money,
Or we'll tell you we don't have the money. There are often times when we run out of money.
They'll tell you they don't have the money, but none of the investors you speak to will tell you we don't have the money. They will just keep talking and talking, and then at the end of it all, find a reason to decline.
And then we're going to get a different answer from Ellie here, because they have outside investors and have since for a while here.
Well, for us, is I would say more of accurate answer. I have in my file, as you brought the question, I saw that I have 148 folders of different investors that we somehow send materials or exchange information. I have about 80 plus folders from different investors whom we haven't done any progress, just normal meetings, 1 or 2 times meetings. That makes a lot of about 228 investors. And we have only about 12 investors on board, both loans, equity, and everything. So that makes it a less than 5% closing in the last 7 years.
I actually tell you, that's a good close rate. Like this is one thing that I see over and over and over again, especially when I'm working at the accelerators. We'll be sitting down, we'll be having lunch. I'll be meeting these companies and talking to them, saying, how many are you doing fundraising, or what's your fundraising like? And they'll just be exasperated and go, "Oh my God, I'm so frustrated with investors." And I'll say, "Well, how many have you talked to?" And they'll say 4. And none of them said yes. And so you've heard here a few times here, it's not about 4 and it's not about 40. It's about talking to 100 if you'd like to close 1 or 2. And personally, raising money for Africa Eats, we use Trello. I haven't counted up the number of Trello cards in a while. Last I did it, it was like 180. We're still waiting for the first institution to say yes. We are funded by individuals and family offices. And so we've raised a few $1 million. Plus, we just closed a crowdfunding, which still you can only do as an American company. So that's why we created the American subsidiary. Only do it at scale at American companies. We have another 147 investors that showed up, but they're all individuals and they wrote tiny checks. Mostly, how do you get more funders? Yeah, it's a lot of the easiest possible way is to just focus on your business and get customers, and somehow by hook or by crook, find some capital as a grant or a business plan competition, which is something Ellie got many years ago. Find some money somewhere that's not an institutional investor, use it to go and boost up your company into a big enough size that investors care, and then go talk to 100 of them. I had a follow-up here. As a follow-up, are there any policies you wish to see in place to encourage more innovation? Any of you guys on the panel here have a suggested policy change to make things better?
I think I have one. This is something that we've really tried in Uganda. The world is going digital, so digital payment is really going to work. And if government really want to support entrepreneurs, is work on these policies that hinder digital payment. Like in Uganda, if you're sending money, you need to pay 0.5% tax on sending, then another 0.5% tax on withdrawal. That's discourages people from using a digital payment. So if one thing that governments need to do is they need to work on policies that supports digital payment for entrepreneurs to work, because in one way or another, we all need to move money as quick as possible to our customers to us, and so on. And if we can't do that, it really delays a lot of things.
Yeah, and I once asked a few years back, I asked one of the taxi drivers or Uber drivers in Kenya, how often he uses M-Pesa, and he just, in the rearview mirror, just looked at me like I was crazy, because the answer is that's what money is now, and that it became that popular because there's no fees on small transactions. So that's a good one. Ellie, I don't know if you raised your hand on this one. You have a suggestion, or Hervé?
My suggestion was a bit just taking it back on not on the challenges, but on the fundraising. And I think the 2 points that I think that it's good to make them clear to other people that, of course, being ready for institutional investors at an early stage is really important. And at some point, one of the things that we use in the past is trying to apply for as many grants and soft kind of capital as much as possible, even though in most cases people tend to apply a few and then think that they've missed. But in most cases, you can end up applying for like 100 applications and only get one or get zero. But that is the easiest way, really being out there looking at the possible cost-effective kind of capital. And the last point is make sure, even if the odds are not in your favor, just do it. Because at some point you can wait for a long time to be at a good point to apply. But in most cases, people apply even when the odds are not in their favor. And I think that's what we did in the past. We were not in a shape that most investors could do, but we were able to show that what the future looks like. And I think it's really important for other entrepreneurs to get that.
All right, thank you for that. And the last question tonight goes to the progress success. I'm not going to try and pronounce the last one.
All right. So mine is not basically what you said on policies, whereby the uptake in some industry is not that much faster compared to some industry. And one of the problems that we've seen is because the governments in Africa, basically, they tend to just put a policy which is not very directly related to startups. It's like a policy which just canvasses the whole industry. So most startups find it very hard to really have that uptake or to maneuver very well in those sectors, because they don't have enough money to move as compared to the big companies if they're trying to compete with those bigger companies, or they're just trying to bring something novel within those industries. Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm going to finish on one note there as I stick contact information. So if you'd like to talk to any of these entrepreneurs, including Heiko, who had internet issues, you can reach him here. I saw some news today that was promising, which is that the common currency for the East Africa Confederation, or East Africa Cooperative, the 6 countries in East Africa, is slated to launch in 2024. So maybe 2 years, maybe 3 years, but it would be lovely. We have now a intra-Africa free trade agreement that's starting to actually do some stuff. And the next issue that we see as investors, and we see trying to help all these companies, it's just too many currencies. And so the more that the East Africa countries come together and start working more together and start trading more together and having a single currency there, and then hopefully the eco on the west side of the continent. There's 35 currencies currently in the continent of Africa, and that's not helping. So that's one policy change that I'm eager to see and seems to be on headed in the right direction. And so with that, I'm gonna call this one done, and thank you for coming. Thank you for sending your questions, and you can find me on the Brella if you have any other questions.